Welcome to Chapter 4. Today we are going to talk about socialization. Before we get started, I just want you guys to know that we are not doing all of Chapter 4. You're only responsible for pages 66 through 82. We do not look at aging or socialization through the life course. All right, so let's get started with what socialization is. Socialization is the lifelong process through which we learn the attitudes, values, and behaviors that are appropriate for members of a particular culture. So we spent chapter 3 looking at what culture is and what are these things that exist within our culture, what are our values, what are our norms, what are our beliefs, what are our traditions. Socialization is the process in which we learn everything that we just talked about in chapter 3. It starts at birth. We start learning, that as soon as we're born, and it never stops. Throughout our lives, we're continuing to learn. We're continuing to develop. So one of the lifelong arguments that occurs in the social sciences is this debate between nature and nurture, which has a greater effect on human development. And what do we mean by nature versus nurture? So nature, we're talking about biological inheritance, or DNA, what we are, our genetics. Whereas nurture, we're looking at our environment, our social environment. So one of the things that we always go back to is which has a greater effect on who we are. Is it, in our genes? Is it our biology? Or is it the environment in which we are raised? So in order to figure this out, we have to look at some case studies. So what you guys are going to do, we're going to look at children who were raised in isolation. So after this video, there's going to be 2 links that you could look at, both the case of Jeannie and the case of Danielle, and they are both children who were raised in isolation. So unfortunately, because of abusive and neglectful parents, children are sometimes raised in very poor, very isolated conditions. And although it would be unethical for sociologists to perform this type of experiment, unfortunately these cases do exist, and sociologists can learn from looking at these cases of children that are raised in isolation. So these are just two case studies that you're going to look at after this in order to do your assignment for Chapter 4. But when we look at these cases of children who were born in isolation, one of the conclusions that we could make is that cases of extreme isolation demonstrate the importance of the earliest socialization experiences for children. So we look at how important our social environment is, and that if we are not taught how to walk and talk and communicate with each other through interactions, we're not going to just learn it. There's no instinct we just don't instinctually know how to talk, how to walk, if it's not modeled for us and if it's not taught to us. So it's not enough for us to just attend to an infant's physical needs. Parents have to concern themselves with children's social development too. And if parents, even just on a lesser end, discourage their children from having friends, children are going to miss out on these social interactions that are critical for emotional growth. As humans, from a sociological standpoint, we need to interact with others in order to develop our sense of self, in order to develop normally and have a healthy social development. On the other side is what's called the nature argument, where, regardless of one's social environment, people are going to develop, and there's things that can only be explained by genetics and not by our social environment. So in order to look at the nature argument, we have to look at twin studies. So there's there's a couple of famous twin studies. We're going to look at Oscar and Jack now. And Oscar and Jack are 2 twins that were separated at birth. Oscar lived in the Czech Republic, and he was raised by a Catholic grandmother. Jack was raised in Trinidad by his Jewish father and ended up joining the Israeli army. When they were reunited in their middle age, they found that both wore wired rim glasses. They had mustaches, they liked spicy foods, sweet liqueurs, and they stored rubber bands on their wrist, and they dipped buttered toast in their coffee. They were both absent-minded, and they flushed the toilet without using it. Just these weird, quirky things. completely, separated at birth, raised in completely different social environments, couldn't be more different. But yet they had all these similarities, even though they had never met and had different social environments. So these similarities could only be explained by genetics, by inheritance. There were some differences, though, that could be explained by your social environments. Jack was a workaholic. Oscar enjoyed his leisure time. Oscar was domineering towards women, and Jack supported feminism. So we see that there are a lot of things that could only be explained by genetics, but there's also a lot that can be explained by social environment too. Another thing that we could look at is the Minnesota twin study, which was a study that was performed in the 1980s. And that looked at identical twins and found that identical twins had similar temperaments and voice patterns and nervous habits even when they were reared apart. But again, when we talk about social environment, the differences were their attitudes, their values, their drinking habits, and things like that. So at the end of the day, when we look at the nature argument, there are some things that have to be explained only by genetics. So, who wins the debate? Okay. If we look at nature versus nurture, who wins the debate? What do sociologists say about this? So sociologists say it's a combination of the two. Right? You can't say it's completely genetics. You can't say that it's completely one social environment. That is actually a combination of two. However, sociologists fall more strongly on the side of nurture, more strongly on the side of one's social environment. So we can't dismiss biology and dismiss the role that it has in shaping our behavior. However, how this manifests, how this comes to be, has a lot to do with our social environment. So where else do we see this nature versus nurture debate? Where else do we hear this? We hear it a lot with addiction, right? Are people genetically predisposed to be alcoholics or drug addicts, or is it their social environment that leads them to use drugs or alcohol? We see it with obesity, right? Are people genetically predisposed to be obese, or is it, the way that they were raised? We see it a lot with mental illness, right? When we look at depression, anxiety, and things like that. And another major area where we see it is criminology. So there is an article that you're going to read for your Chapter 4 assignment that looks at the genetic component of people who are violent criminals, and then you're asked to share your thoughts of that. Continue to read on to Chapter 4 about the development of the self and the agents of socialization, because you'll need to look at the agents of socialization in your next discussion. Okay, have a good night.